My favorite Old Testament passage on giving is 1 Chronicles 29, where it says, David blessed the Lord, Yahweh, again, that's his personal name, in the presence of all the assembly. And David said, Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, for all that is in the heavens and on earth is yours. They've collected all this money to support the building of the temple. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and in your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. And now we thank you, our God, and we praise your glorious name. But who am I, and what is my people, that we should be able thus to offer willingly to you? For all things come from you, and out of your own we have given you. And skipping down to verse 16, O Yahweh our God, O Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand and is all your own. And then the end of verse 17, I have freely offered all these things, and now I have seen your people who are present here offering freely and joyously to you. What a picture of giving. This is what giving should be, where we recognize it all belongs to God. That's kind of the very first step of stewardship. We are not owners, we are stewards. We're God's investment managers. David and the leaders of Israel gave generously, and when the people saw that, it made them eager to give. Christian leaders can and should lead the way in giving by sharing from our hearts, telling our own giving stories in a joy-driven and Christ-centered way. I have a book called Generosity is the Good Life, where I tell over 100 very short giving stories along the way. And these are things that people do with their own giftings and their own callings. Everybody can and should be a giver. And God has wired us to give in certain ways and in certain contexts. The greatest New Testament passage on giving is 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. That's northern Greece, and he's writing to the Corinthians who are in southern Greece. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. These are people that needed help, and here are people who are described as living in extreme poverty, but their extreme poverty, in their abundance of joy in the midst of severe affliction, overflowed in a wealth of generosity. And that just boggles the mind. You know, all the reasons we have, excuses we have for not giving and helping other people, just pale in comparison to the severe trial and the extreme poverty that these people had, yet in joy they gave. In Acts, we read the only statement of Jesus not recorded in the Gospels, but recorded in the book of Acts. And that's in chapter 20, verse 35. The Lord Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. The word translated blessed there is the Greek word makarios, and it means happy making. It is more happy making to give than to receive. I know many generous givers, and I've never met an unhappy one. I've met many rich people who are miserable. In A Christmas Carol, Scrooge is the miser, right? And that's where we get the word miserable. Misers are miserable, but people who are real givers always find happiness. Doesn't mean their lives go smoothly. It means that They find happiness in giving because what Jesus said was true. Does God want us to be happy? Well, Psalm 16:11 says, "In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." There is joy in the presence of God, and there is joy in the promises of eternal reward. Jesus said in Matthew 6:19 and following, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So Jesus says, don't store up for yourself treasures on earth. But what reasons does he give for this? Because treasures are bad? No, because they just won't last. You can't take it with you. So Christ's point is that earthly treasures aren't going to last. Either they leave us or we leave them. So why does Jesus tell us not to store up treasures on earth? Because it's wrong? No, primarily because it's just stupid. It makes no sense. They're not going to last. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Why does he command us to do this? Because it's the right thing? Well, of course it's the right thing. But mostly because it's the smart thing to do. Treasures in heaven will last. He's making a pragmatic argument. So, you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. And that's what we do through giving. So God is not against us storing up treasures for ourselves. In fact, he commands us to store up treasures for ourselves. He just says, stop storing the treasures up in the stupid place where they're not going to last, and start storing them up in the smart place where they're going to last forever. He's not saying renounce your treasures. He's saying relocate your treasures. Again, that's what we do through generous giving. So store up treasures for yourselves. Does that kind of sound selfish? Well, it's not selfish, but it is in our own self-interest. Giving isn't only for others' good, but for our good. Jesus said it's more happy-making to give than to receive. We want to be happy? We can find happiness through giving. God always wants what's best for us. I hope you believe that, because sometimes happiness is spoken against like it's an intrinsically bad thing. It's not. When we try to find our happiness apart from Christ and in sin, that's a bad thing. The problem isn't the pursuit of happiness. The problem is in believing and acting as if we can find happiness in the wrong places instead of in the right places God graciously gives to us. Things have mass, and mass has gravity, and gravity holds us in orbit around our things. If we don't give, our hearts stay right in our own little orbits. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If our treasure is in ourselves and what surrounds us, that's where our heart is going to be. Money and possessions and houses and lands and investments can become our center of gravity. Our heart stays where our money stays, but when we give, our hearts go where our money goes. So if there's an earthquake in India, and I've been giving generously to planting churches in India in this particular area, and I hear about the earthquake, I'm down on my knees praying for these people because I have an investment in them. I'm connected with them. So our hearts go where we give our money, and the reminder is it's really not our money, it's God's money in the first place, and since it's his, we should ask him what he wants us to do with it. Where we put our money doesn't just show where our heart is, it determines where our heart goes. So you want a heart for Microsoft or Apple or whatever, put your money into it, invest in it. Want a heart for General Motors? Buy up shares of General Motors, and suddenly you'll be interested in what the company's doing. You want a heart for your church or a strategic kingdom ministry out there, a heart for the poor? Then invest your treasures there. People say, I wish I had more of a heart for missions. Jesus tells us exactly how to get it. Put your money in missions and your heart will follow. Put your treasures where you want your heart to go, because it's sure to go there. You want a heart for your church, for God. Develop vested interest in God's work. Give, and in that sense, buy up shares in God's kingdom. Have vested interest in what's going to matter for eternity. Giving delivers present joy because it's more happy making to give than to receive. You're drawn close to God, the giver, and to the people you're giving to. Giving delivers future joy as well, an everlasting gain, eternal reward, treasures in heaven that will never be lost. One of Satan's biggest lies is that we really have only two choices. One, doing it our way and being happy, and two, doing it God's way and being miserable. That is totally false. It's when we do it our way that we become miserable. It's when we do it God's way that we become happy. Giving is God's way. Obeying God, doing the right thing, is always the smart thing. Doing the wrong thing is always the stupid thing. It's never in our own best interests. We need a paradigm shift. We should live not for the dot, but for the line. Our present life is a dot, and from that dot extends a line that goes out for eternity. We have to live in the dot, that's where we are. But if we're smart, we will live in light of the line. We will live for the line that will go on forever. This present life ends, it's brief, but that line that extends forever, the line of eternity, everybody's going to spend eternity in one of two places, heaven or hell. Christians will spend it in heaven. And so what we need to do is be smart, to not live for that dot that we're living in, but to live for the line of eternity. Jim Elliot was one of the 5 missionaries in Ecuador murdered by the Auca Indians in the 1950s. He said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Now, does it sound to you like Jim Elliot didn't care about gain? No, on the contrary, he cared about the right kind of gain that would last. Financial planners tell us when it comes to your money, don't just think 3 days ahead or 3 months or 3 years ahead. Think 30 years ahead. Well, Jesus takes it further. He says, don't just ask, how will this investment be paying off in 30 years? Ask, how will it be paying off in 30 million years? Giving is the only antidote to materialism. Without generous giving, you can never topple the money idol. The things around us become idols. Money becomes an idol, and that idol must be toppled for God to sit on the throne. So for us to worship and follow God, every time we give, we are divesting ourselves of something that could be our idol. And when we give it away to the glory of God, we honor him and we draw closer to him and to his kingdom instead of to our little kingdoms here on earth. The Copernican revolution was the realization that the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. The earth revolves around the sun. Giving is a Copernican revolution of the Christian life. Giving moves my possessions to their proper center of gravity, God himself. Life no longer revolves around houses and lands and cars and things. It revolves around God's kingdom. By giving, we relocate our treasures from earth to heaven. Giving breaks us out of the orbit of money. It gives us a new center of gravity in heaven where God is. Grace is the lightning, and giving is the thunder. Grace comes first. As lightning comes first, then thunder follows lightning, and our giving follows grace. You know, the word grace is a word that means giving. God's grace to us is God's generous giving to us, and it's infinitely and ultimately generous, and it's the pattern for our own giving. The more God's grace grips you, the more you will give, and the more you give, the more God's grace will grip you. It's true, but it's often misunderstood that God generously provides for givers. But why does he do so? Why does God give more than we need? Well, some say so we can live in luxury, live like a king's kid. And we think, well, Jesus was the king's kid. How did he live? But what does the Bible actually say? I'm glad you asked. It says, God will supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. And you will be made rich in every way so that what? What's going to follow here? This is in 2 Corinthians 9, verses 10 and 11. So how do we finish that sentence? You'll be made rich in every way so that what? So you can accumulate more and more, so you can live in luxury? No, it says, so that God will make you rich in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion. That's what the Word of God says. Have you ever wondered why God makes you prosper? Well, you don't ever have to wonder again, because that passage tells us, so that we can be generous on every occasion. So we're God's delivery boys and girls. Suppose you handed a package to the FedEx guy, and the FedEx guy comes to my door a lot. Usually he's bringing something, but sometimes I'm sending something out. But suppose I found out that all the time I've been giving him packages, he's been taking them home and opening it and keeping it for himself. And so let's say I confront him and I say, what are you doing? These don't belong to you. These belong to the people that I was going to send it to. And suppose he responded to me and said, well, wait, if you didn't want me to keep those packages, you shouldn't have given them to me in the first place. Well, hey, my response would be, you're the FedEx guy. That's your job, right? Just because God puts packages in our hands doesn't mean we're supposed to keep them. We're supposed to deliver them where God wants them to go. Now, do we keep some of the money and use some of the money God gives us? Of course, to take care of our families and all of that. I'm not disputing that. But God has given most of us a great abundance beyond that. And so we need to be generous and invest it in his kingdom. 5 minutes after we die, we'll know exactly how we should have lived. We'll know exactly how we should have given. But then it will be too late to go back and change it. This is our opportunity as we live in a world under the fall, a broken world. This is our opportunity to give generously so as to feed the hungry and help the sick and get the gospel to those who have never heard it. On the new earth, as we live there for eternity, there will be none of those needs because God will wipe away the tears from every eye. That will be a glorious thing. But what that means is we have a limited opportunity, our lives on earth, to give and to give generously to help the needy. So ask yourself, 5 minutes after I die, what will I wish I would have given away while I still had the chance? And when you come up with the answer, why not give it away now? Why not spend the rest of your life closing the gap between what you'll wish you would have given and what you actually are giving? Most Christians store up our treasures on earth. What that means is our treasures are on earth, so every day of our life we're moving away from our treasures. And Jesus says, turn it around. Store up your treasures in heaven, so every day of your life, instead of moving away from your treasures, you're actually moving toward your treasures. The person who spends his life moving away from his treasures has reason to despair. The person who spends his life moving toward his treasures in heaven has reason to rejoice. So, are you moving toward your treasures or away from them? That's the same question as, are you giving generously or are you not? Finally, don't apologize for telling people the good news about giving. Paul commends the Philippians for their generous giving. Then he says, not that I desire your gifts. What I desire is that more be credited to your account. That's in Philippians 4. Giving is depositing to your account in heaven. If they become givers, believers will be better off now in terms of their personal happiness and helping others, and they will be better off forever. So do yourself a favor by becoming a giver yourself, and do others a favor by encouraging them to discover the joy of giving. God bless you.